Live in peace. And I really feel that when we make deals, see two countries.
La economía circular, el que se trabaje desde lo más abajo, desde las...
¡Vamos, migrantes!
Differences peacefully, in full respect of sovereignty and territory.
Proyectar a nuestros productores, nuestros prestadores de servicio para seguir siendo...
Cameras flash, the headlines scream, and within hours, Mexico's political world went into free fall. But what happens when Washington names your own allies as cartel collaborators? Late last night, President Donald Trump's administration blacklisted over 50 Mexican officials, banning them from entering the United States. The announcement hit like a thunderclap in Mexico City. Among those named were key figures in President Claudia Sheinbaum's ruling Marina party governors, ex-ministers, and party strategists accused of working hand-in-hand with the deadly Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG. Sheinbaum erupted in outrage, calling the move a direct political assault. Yet Trump remained unmoved. Standing on the White House lawn, he declared, "They're not politicians, they're cartel operatives in suits." His words drew both applause and alarm across Washington. Behind the scenes, the US intelligence community insists the blacklist is only the beginning. According to Reuters and Defense News, the ban stems from months of surveillance revealing financial channels connecting Mexican public officials with CJNG's arms and narcotic supply routes. Analysts warn the evidence is staggering: offshore accounts, campaign donations from shell companies, and encrypted communications linking senior political aides to known traffickers. The implications reach far beyond the Rio Grande. If these allegations hold, it would mean that cartels have penetrated state institutions on a scale not seen since Colombia's narco era of the 1980s. DW reports that the Mexican Interior Ministry is now in crisis mode, fearing mass resignations and retaliatory violence against whistleblowers. Strategically, the move represents a bold shift in Trump's regional doctrine. Rather than relying solely on Mexico's cooperation, Washington is targeting individuals, directly naming, shaming, and isolating them economically. Al Jazeera notes that this mirrors sanctions once used against Hezbollah-linked officials in Lebanon. The message is clear: corruption tied to narco-terrorism will be treated as a matter of US national security. The timing could not be more explosive. With the Russia-Ukraine conflict stretching NATO's resources, Israel locked in a shadow war with Iran, and tensions flaring across the South China Sea, America's southern front can no longer be ignored. Trump's strategy seeks to reassert control over the hemisphere, signaling that the United States will no longer tolerate what The Guardian calls soft border diplomacy. But inside Mexico, fear runs deeper than politics. Families of the accused are under siege. Civil servants are vanishing from offices overnight. Anonymous threats circulate online. Traitors die slow. For ordinary citizens, the line between state and cartel grows harder to see. The question haunting both nations tonight is this: the dawn of a cleaner Mexico, or the opening salvo of a new kind of war between allies turned adversaries? A ranch in the hills of Jalisco. On the surface it looks peaceful. Horses, fields, a windmill turning in the dusk. But beneath that calm lies a nightmare. Locals call it La Finca del Silencio, the silent ranch. What investigators found there would unravel one of Mexico's most disturbing secrets. Jose Ascension Murguia Santiago, the mild-mannered former mayor of Teotitlan, had been living a double life. According to leaked intelligence obtained by Reuters and The Guardian, Murguia's property served as a CJNG command post, a place where cartel recruits were trained, kidnapped civilians were held, and the dead were buried. Prosecutors called it a triple threat base, training ground, prison, and graveyard. The FBI and DEA had been tracking satellite imagery for months, confirming heat signatures consistent with large-scale operations. Murguia's story exposes something more sinister than personal greed. It's a case study in infiltration, how cartels stop bribing after elections and start selecting their own candidates before them. BBC News reports that campaign funding from phantom companies linked to CJNG quietly flowed into Murguia's mayoral race years before he ever took office. Once elected, he opened the gates. Police posts vanished. Federal inspections were delayed. The cartel didn't just influence politics, it became politics. For Washington, this revelation hit like a strategic alarm. Trump's National Security Council has labeled cartel infiltration an internal security threat equivalent to terrorism. Defense News notes that CJNG's structure now resembles that of hybrid insurgencies, blending organized crime, paramilitary discipline, and digital propaganda. What began as a regional gang has evolved into a quasi-state actor with its own logistics intelligence and even drone capabilities. The parallels abroad are striking. Just as Russian Wagner units once infiltrated African governments under the guise of security advisors, CJNG operatives embed themselves within local Mexican administrations. In Gaza and southern Lebanon, Iran's proxies rely on similar tactics, blending militias into political movements to shield operations under legitimate fronts. Meanwhile, Chinese syndicates exploit cyber channels and logistics companies to launder profits across Latin America. This convergence crime merging with politics is reshaping how wars are fought. The US-Mexico border is no longer just a line, it's a fault zone where corruption, technology, and terror collide. And yet beyond strategy lies human ruin. Dozens of families from Teotitlan still search for missing sons and daughters believed to have vanished at Murguia's ranch. DW reported that some of the remains recovered were children abducted to intimidate rival communities. The emotional toll is devastating. Entire villages have emptied. Local journalists who dared to investigate now live under federal protection or in exile. In the chaos, one question keeps echoing: if mayors, police chiefs, and even governors can serve two masters, one elected, one armed, what remains of democracy itself? It began with a phone call from Washington, brief, cold, and final. Within minutes, Baja California Governor Marina del Pilar Avala's political empire crumbled. Her US visa was revoked. Her name appeared on the blacklist. No explanation, no appeal, only one message: entry denied. Avala, once the radiant face of Mexico's new political generation, stood before cameras trembling with fury. She accused President Trump of imperialist interference, insisting she had no cartel connections. Yet within hours, American intelligence leaks told a different story. Reuters confirmed that US Treasury investigators traced wire transfers from shell companies in Tijuana and Sinaloa to accounts tied to Avala's husband, a former congressman with deep business links. Those companies, according to BBC News sources, were already under DEA surveillance for laundering CJNG profits through construction and real estate projects. What made this case explosive wasn't just the money, it was what it revealed. Cartel financing had entered Mexico's top political bloodstream. Campaign donations disguised as infrastructure investments, luxury homes purchased through offshore trusts, political rallies sponsored by firms registered in Panama and Belize. Trump's State Department branded it institutional corruption, warning that cartel networks had achieved de facto political influence in several northern states. Avala's downfall echoed far beyond Mexico. Analysts at Defense News and Jane's Intelligence Review drew comparisons to Ukraine's pre-war infiltration crisis, when oligarch-linked networks quietly shaped regional administrations before Moscow's invasion. In both cases, unchecked money eroded sovereignty long before any soldier crossed a border. The White House now views cartel infiltration as part of a larger global pattern: the weaponization of corruption. Meanwhile, Israel's confrontation with Iran has shown how financial channels can be as lethal as missiles. Tehran's proxies thrive on hidden banking circuits. CJNG thrives on the same model. And in East Asia, US intelligence warns of Chinese triads partnering with state-owned firms to manipulate ports and logistics, an eerie mirror of Mexico's narco-political nexus. The human toll is just as grim. In Baja California, local journalists who probed Avala's finances were found dead, their bodies dumped on desert roads. Families of whistleblowers fled north seeking asylum. DW reports that nearly 3,000 residents have left cartel-dominated districts this year alone, a silent exodus born of fear, not war. For Washington, Avala's case proves that the front line of America's security no longer runs through trenches or checkpoints, but through bank accounts, campaign coffers, and encrypted devices. The war on drugs has mutated into a war for integrity itself. But as Trump's sanctions ripple across Mexico's elite, the uneasy question remains: can corruption this deep be purged by force? Or does every strike simply drive it further underground into the very veins of power? The scandal that followed would shake Mexico's ruling class to its core. His name, Adon Austo Lopez Hernandez, once untouchable, now accused of betraying the very system he helped build. For years, Lopez was the power behind the curtain. A veteran of the Marina party, former governor of Tabasco, and close confidant of former President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, he was considered political royalty. But now a storm of leaked intelligence and financial audits has pulled him into the same vortex consuming Scheinbaum's government. According to Reuters and Al Jazeera, Lopez is accused of protecting a criminal syndicate known as La Barradora, a network linked to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, while he publicly vowed to fight organized crime. Classified documents from Mexico's defense ministry reviewed by The Guardian reveal that Lopez personally appointed cartel-linked officials to top security posts. One of them, Hernan Bermudez Requena, allegedly doubled as a gang commander overseeing kidnappings and extortion across southern Mexico. Financial audits later uncovered nearly 700 million pesos, close to $40 million missing from Lopez's administration. DW reports that the funds originally intended for infrastructure and law enforcement programs vanished into a labyrinth of offshore accounts. Yet despite the damning evidence, Lopez insists he's a victim of political persecution. His allies echo the same refrain heard from others on Trump's blacklist: Washington wants to humiliate Mexico. But inside the Beltway, Trump's message is blunt. This isn't humiliation, he told reporters. It's accountability. The administration's decision to include Lopez on the sanctions list signals that no rank, no legacy, and no political shield will protect those suspected of aiding cartels. Strategically, this marks a turning point. By naming top officials, the United States is not just punishing corruption, it's dismantling a regional power structure that has long resisted external scrutiny. Defense News notes that this aligns with a broader U.S. doctrine using financial warfare and targeted sanctions to weaken criminal political alliances, much like sanctions against Russian oligarchs or Iranian Revolutionary Guard front companies. Globally, the parallels are uncanny. In Ukraine, Western analysts exposed how Kremlin-aligned politicians funneled state resources to paramilitary networks, just as Mexico's governors now stand accused of enabling cartel militias. In Iran, state-backed smuggling finances proxy armies from Lebanon to Yemen. And across the Pacific, U.S. agencies warn of China's Belt and Road projects, creating shadow dependencies that mirror cartel-style control, soft coercion masked as cooperation. Yet beneath the geopolitics lies the pain of ordinary Mexicans. In Tabasco, where Lopez once promised prosperity, schools remain shuttered, police outposts abandoned, and families terrorized by daily kidnappings. The sense of betrayal runs deep. He was supposed to protect us, said one resident interviewed by BBC News. Instead, he sold us. As Lopez's political empire crumbles, the symbolism is impossible to ignore. A nation built on promises of reform now stands accused of being compromised from within. Trump's sanctions may expose the rot, but can they cure it, or will each fallen official only reveal how deep the roots of this corruption truly go? Night skies over Sonora blaze with the faint hum of drones. Somewhere below, cartel convoys wind through dirt roads, headlights off, engines muted. Above them, silent U.S. Reapers circle at 30,000 feet, unmanned, unmarked, relentless. The war that Mexico once denied is now fully airborne. President Donald Trump's drone diplomacy is no longer a secret. After the blacklist shook Mexico's government, Washington escalated. Citing CJNG's classification as a foreign terrorist organization, Trump authorized intelligence-driven drone operations deep inside Mexican territory. According to Reuters and Defense News, these missions began in coordination with select Mexican National Guard units, with President Claudia Sheinbaum's grudging consent. Publicly, Sheinbaum condemned the campaign as a violation of sovereignty. Privately, she cooperated. Under pressure from Washington and facing collapsing approval at home, she ordered 10,000 troops north to aid in cross-border crackdowns. MQ-9 Reapers operated jointly by the CIA, and the Pentagon began identifying cartel convoys and fentanyl labs. By year's end, over 50 targets had been neutralized, hundreds arrested, and dozens of labs destroyed. The results were undeniable. BBC News confirms that homicide rates dropped 12% and femicides 18%, the sharpest decline in a decade. But DW notes the price: civilian fear, border tension, and protests erupting in cities from Guadalajara to Tijuana. Mexican lawmakers accuse Trump of turning their skies into a permanent occupation zone. Strategically, the drone program represents Trump's broader hemispheric shift, a model of preemptive intervention. While NATO strains under the weight of Ukraine's defense, Washington sees Mexico as the new proving ground for counterinsurgency in the Western Hemisphere. Jane's Defense Weekly reports that lessons learned from precision strikes in Eastern Europe and the Middle East are now being applied to anti-cartel warfare. The same technologies once used to track Iranian proxies in Syria are now mapping CJNG safe houses across Jalisco. But parallels run deeper. In Israel's current campaign against Iranian-backed groups, drones are not just weapons, they're symbols of deterrence. China, too, has begun integrating UAVs into its domestic policing and maritime control strategy, blurring the line between surveillance and sovereignty. The US move in Mexico sends a similar signal: no border will shield those who threaten American lives through fentanyl weapons or terror. Still human, costs mount. Families caught in crossfire report drones overhead day and night, their whirring sound now synonymous with dread. We used to fear gunfire, a villager in Sinaloa told Al Jazeera. Now we fear the silence before the strike. The humanitarian dilemma mirrors those seen in Gaza and Donetsk, the balance between security and freedom, between sovereignty and survival. In Washington, Trump frames it differently. This is not war, he declared. This is protection. Yet even within the Pentagon, analysts warn that prolonged drone campaigns risk turning Mexico into another endless theater, a Latin echo of America's post-9/11 operations. For now, the skies remain busy, the sanctions keep tightening, and both nations brace for the unknown. How long can cooperation built on fear and necessity last before one errant missile or one political misstep ignites a fire no drone can extinguish? It ends where every empire of corruption begins, not on the battlefield, but behind closed doors. Even as the raids intensify and drones shadow the highways, Washington's deepest fear is no longer what lurks outside the border, it's what's already inside the system. The final phase of Trump's crackdown has exposed a chilling reality: the cartels no longer fight the government, they are the government in certain regions. According to Reuters and The Guardian, CJNG and Sinaloa factions have infiltrated municipal offices, police departments, and even segments of the judiciary. Agents from ICE and DEA now warn that Mexican cartel intelligence rivals that of small nations, complete with surveillance drones, encrypted communications, and cyber units capable of tracking federal agents. The threat is evolving. The Department of Homeland Security recently confirmed credible intelligence that cartel networks have placed bounties on U.S. border officers: $30,000 for information, $100,000 for kidnappings, and 6 figures for confirmed assassinations. DW reports these orders are traced to CJNG figures desperate to disrupt U.S.-Mexico coordination. The cartels, it seems, have declared a shadow war, one fought not with tanks, but with corruption fear and infiltration. Trump's response has been swift. The White House directed Homeland Security and the Pentagon to treat these threats as acts of terror. If you target our agents, Trump warned in a televised address, you will be hunted like terrorists. New funding authorized through the Homeland Integrity Directive now expands federal surveillance and cyber monitoring along the border, blending counterterrorism with domestic law enforcement. But as America's digital shield tightens, global parallels loom large. Defense News highlights how Ukraine's defense networks face similar infiltration threats from Russian cyber operatives. In Israel, Iranian proxies attempt to penetrate security agencies through fake NGOs. In the Indo-Pacific, Chinese intelligence embeds within logistics chains to monitor US movements. Each front reflects the same war, the quiet dismantling of trust from within. For Mexico, the damage is personal. Entire police departments in Michoacan and Guerrero have resigned under threat. Judges who ruled against cartel suspects vanish overnight. A generation of young Mexicans grows up believing politics and crime are the same thing. Every vote feels like paying protection money, one student told Al Jazeera. And yet, amid fear, there's defiance. Across Mexico, citizens groups are rising: mothers of the disappeared journalists in hiding, and veterans who refuse to surrender their communities. They film raids, expose bribes, and share footage that embarrasses both cartel bosses and corrupt officials. It's dangerous work, but it's proof that the fight for Mexico's soul is not over. For Washington, this conflict now defines a generation, a test of American resolve, of Trump's doctrine that power without control is weakness. The United States stands at a crossroads: push harder and risk total rupture with its southern neighbor, or ease pressure and let infiltration continue. As the sun rises over a tense border, one question hangs heavier than the drones overhead: can any nation truly win a war against an enemy that wears its own uniform? In 2025, President Donald Trump's administration unleashed a seismic offensive against cartel-linked corruption in Mexico, blacklisting over 50 high-ranking officials from President Claudia Sheinbaum's Marina party. What began as a political storm soon revealed systemic infiltration, from mayors like Jose Ascension Murguia aiding CJNG death camps to governors such as Marina del Pilar Avala, accused of laundering cartel money through campaign funds. As investigations deepened, even veteran figures like Adon Austo Lopez fell under scrutiny for enabling criminal networks. Amid rising violence, Trump escalated to drone warfare, deploying Reapers across Mexican skies under a controversial counterterrorism doctrine. The results, a drop in homicides, but soaring public fear, reflect a fragile balance between sovereignty and survival. Yet behind every strike lies a darker war cartels infiltrating police courts and politics itself. With cartels placing bounties on U.S. agents and Washington labeling them terrorist entities, the struggle has entered a new phase not just against traffickers, but against corruption that corrodes nations from within. The question remains, how far can America's campaign go before the fight to defend democracy starts to look like the war it was meant